no, you're crazy. Like, no one's going to vote for an 18-year-old kid to serve on a school board. We were met with a lot of resistance in the sense of, oh, you're too young to understand. Let the adults in the room
Right.
handle it. And so, that kind of demoralized us in the sense of like, hey, we are on the ground facing a lot of these issues, and yet our voices aren't really being heard in the decision-making process.
Welcome to Around the District. I'm Nicole Brown, and our guest today is Armando Montero. Armando is the president of the Tempe School Board.
Hmm.
So, Armando, why don't you start by telling us a little bit about you and what you're doing for Tempe?
Yeah. So I've grown up here in LD12 in Ahwatukee specifically, went to high school at Desert Vista. And really my time at Desert Vista is what motivated me to run for the school board. I first got involved in politics around my sophomore year of high school. But really what got me involved at the school board level and the local level was the issue of mental health and social emotional wellness. Um, I went through a lot of my own personal mental health struggles when I was in high school. And my sophomore year, I ended up losing a pretty good friend of mine to suicide. And so that's really what galvanized me to get involved, which just started out with about 40 students showing up at a school board meeting and saying, hey, we're students in the district and these are some of the challenges that we're facing, and we'd love your partnership in trying to raise awareness about this. And so, um, we had asked them to pass a resolution around mental health that was calling on then Governor Ducey and the legislature at the time to allocate more funding to school counselors, psychologists, social workers, etc. But we were met with a lot of resistance in the sense of, oh, you're too young to understand. Let the adults in the room
Right.
handle it. And so, that kind of demoralized us in the sense of like, hey, we are on the ground facing a lot of these issues, and yet our voices aren't really being heard in the decision-making process. And so somebody at the time on the board had said, hey, you should consider running for the board. And I was like, no, you're crazy. Like, no one's going to vote for an 18-year-old kid to serve on a school board. Um, After a while, decided to throw my hat in the ring, honestly not expecting to win, but just to at least raise awareness of why young people, especially on something like a school board that's making decisions for 12,000 kids on a daily basis, one of those five voices should be someone that's been in the classroom recently,
Right.
especially at the time with COVID going on and all the other issues. There's some unique things that I think someone who's been in school recently could bring. And luckily, that paid off, and we had a competitive 8-way race, but we got some good people elected and a great board, and still to this day, in my second term now, and so fortunate to work with an amazing board.
Were you the youngest person
Yes.
elected at 18 years old?
Yes, I was 19 at the time, got
You
elected,
got
but
elected.
youngest at
Okay.
Tempe Union, yeah.
Yeah, I love it when people say, I didn't expect to win. I did the same thing when I was a delegate for Arizona.
Hmm.
I didn't expect to win it. I didn't know anything about politics. So I
Yeah.
just threw my name. When you need to make a change or you see something needs to be done and you just throw your hat in the ring, it works every single time. Whether
Yes.
you make it or not, you impact in some kind of way. And I think that's awesome.
Yeah,
So now
absolutely.
that this is your second term
Hmm.
and you're now president, this is the second time you were president of Tempe U, is that correct?
Yes, this is my third year being president.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah.
And so, how is that going? Because you're leading, I'm sure everybody's older than you,
Yes.
right? So, how's that going from a leadership perspective?
It's been going great, and I think part of it is I'm lucky to have a board that also values having that perspective of someone who's younger in this position.
Mhm.
But of course, I mean, I would say my first 6 months in office, maybe more, wasn't like that. I think there was an initial sense of skepticism, especially from just the district staff perspective
Mhm.
of, these are career professionals that have doctorate degrees that have worked all their way up to get here at a district level administrator position. And now they're having to listen to a 19-year-old kid that just graduated the district. So there's an initial sense of like,
The superintendent of whatever
yes,
superintendent at the time would,
yes, yes.
probably felt that way, right? Like,
Oh yeah,
you just literally, I have teachers older than you, right?
yes,
So,
yes. And I remember like the first couple of board meetings, there was this like some comments of like, oh, you're actually asking good questions. I was like, I don't think that sounds the way you think it does.
right.
But I think as we really got in there and started to do the work and show that I was there to, for the kids and for the teachers and for the community and really doing, work that I said I was going to work on when I campaigned. And, that started with mental health policies, that started with accountability policies, especially around COVID and making sure that we're doing right by kids as we were trying to navigate the pandemic. And so many other things around really shifting our board to be focused on students and student outcomes. And so
I think that's needed.
Mhm.
Like those diverse younger voices are needed. And when you said earlier, you said, they're like, who's this kid type of deal. I think we run into that a lot.
Mhm.
And it's either your age or your experience,
Yes.
right? And then people, quote unquote, people who are like professionals, quote unquote, because I mean, what does that really mean in
Mhm.
politics? But when they see somebody, now I've been to some of your board meetings and
Mhm.
I've seen you in action.
Yes.
And I would not have known that you're in your 20s, basically, because you hold yourself pretty well. So tell me, I know you have a background in law,
Mhm.
right? You're going to be a lawyer.
Yes.
You're in school to become a lawyer.
Yes.
So tell me how those leadership skills or things that you've learned from that perspective, how you brought that to the school board.
Yeah, I mean, I think honestly, being on the school board is part of what motivated me to go to law school in the first place. And I think part of that is recognizing in a position like a school board, where a lot of what you do is related to state law and federal law and the things that we can and can't do in many ways, that we are constrained in what we can do as a board to do right by students. And so I think that experience and that perspective is really what showed me of like, hey, being able to navigate the law, understand the law, but also the skills that they teach you in law school around interpretation and advocacy and all those things, really trying to get a more nuanced perspective on the law, I think, especially in the legislature, but also on a school board is really useful. And I think is where a lot of good change can really happen when you know how to navigate those complex environments. And I think kind of the nitty gritty is where a lot of smaller changes can be made that when together make a larger difference. And so I think that's kind of been the perspective I've also brought to the school board is, change takes time and change is messy. It's not always pretty.
Right.
Especially everyone told me, and I think it was true after the first year, is like, we have 4-year terms, but one term is not enough to get what you want done because, we can write policy all we want, but it's just words on a piece of paper unless we have the buy-in from a staff and the community who are there implementing this policy. And so, I think trying to navigate that atmosphere is something that I had to learn over the past 4 years on the board. And I think something that now, as we're having a more mature board and people that are continuously running again and kind of have that level of experience, helps us become a better governing body.
Can you talk about any specific policies that you may have helped facilitate or implement into the Tempe U school district that impacted students in a positive way, like for say mental health,
Mhm.
which is a really big issue in society today. So can you talk about any of those policies? Are you able to, by the way? Because
Yeah.
this, okay. Just
No,
want to make
yeah,
sure.
absolutely.
Just want to make sure these are his personal views and not those of Tempe Union High School. This is
Yes.
our conversation.
Yes. No,
So
of course. Yeah, I think back to mental health, that was my first big policy that we tackled when I got on the board. And I think part of that was recognizing that this is right as we were transitioning back from virtual learning to in-person learning. And so we recognized as a district that mental health was going to be a huge priority for all of our staff and for us as a board. And so we passed a resolution to form a committee that I had the opportunity to chair. It was about 24 people that included students, teachers, administrators, parents, community partners that specialize in mental health and professionals that specialize in mental health. And we spent about 3-4 months just crafting a new policy for our district that dealt with suicide prevention, intervention, and postvention, as well as a regulation to go along with that with our administrators. And we were, I think, the first district in the state to do something like that. We really didn't have a template to go off of. And so we were kind of building this all from scratch to really build an in-depth policy about how we provide services to students, as well as, a lot of the times it's kind of swept under the rug. But in the unfortunate event that something does happen, what's the protocol to ensure that our students have the resources that they need, that our teachers have the resources that they need? And so that policy we passed in 2021, and since then, I mean, we've transformed the way that we have delivered our mental health services, but also in the sense of reducing the stigma around mental health. It's been a big deal because our teachers and our students feel more comfortable talking about these issues, knowing that these conversations are happening at the highest level of the district. And so beyond that, we've invested a lot more in our mental health professionals. We doubled the amount of Care 7 specialists that our schools have in partnership with the city of Tempe and a lot of other things. But I think that's one example of, I think, really where policy can make a huge difference. And I think we've seen the result of that.
that's great. You know why it's 2020, and you probably were just getting out of high school when COVID hit, and but the impact on student learning from in person, where
Yeah.
they're society where they can be around their friends to at home online,
Mm-hmm.
it was a big transition. A lot of kids didn't fare well from
Yes.
that. So it's really great that you guys were able to do that. But that wasn't enough for you now, was it? So you had to go this time. Now you're going to throw your name in the hat to become a state representative for
Yes.
Legislative District 12.
Yes.
So tell me what made you want to go that route and make that decision.
Yeah, I mean, a little bit like school board, I think it was unexpected. I wasn't expecting to be running for state rep this year. But honestly, if you would have asked me like a year or two ago if I would have considered running, the answer would have been no. But what changed that was my experience on the board. I think the consistent underfunding of public education, the way that we've seen the legislature and our state government treat teachers and school staff and public education in its entirety, we as a board had to vote to cut 54 full-time positions from our budget last year. And having to be up there and vote to terminate these positions, these were people that had been with Tempe Union their entire professional career, who dedicated
Were they
their
teachers
lives.
or just across the board?
No teachers, but across different support level positions. We made that determination that we were going to try and make cuts that were as far away from the classroom as possible. But that experience of having to do that really, I think, in that board meeting, if you go back and watch it, it's a very emotional board meeting for all of us. And none of us wanted to do it, but we had to survive as a district. And it's not unique to Tempe Union. We're seeing with what Kyrene is going through,
right.
With what Tempe Elementary might have to go through, with what Mesa Public Schools or Scottsdale.
And Kyrene's going to close allegedly 8 schools,
yes.
right?
Yes.
So, and you guys didn't have to close schools because of the route you took.
Right? Yes. I mean, we're in a little bit different position because we're high school only. So our schools are much bigger. I know like middle school and elementaries are much smaller. So it's a much different calculus for them. But still, I mean, we're facing the same issue of declining enrollment. And again, it's not just unique to us in LD12 and the districts that we have. But, yes, part of it is just economics, right? The kids aren't there. And I think what we're missing is large part of that is for a lot of the policy decisions that are being made at the state level, right? When we talk about affordable housing, we know that, it's becoming less and less affordable for younger families to be moving into our district. We're seeing the aging population of our district and less mobility because of that. And so these types of issues have an impact on our public schools that may not be recognized kind of when we initially think about it. And so I think recognizing that if I really want to kind of take that advocacy to the next level, I think the state legislature is the place to be able to really make some of those, make a difference, and not just education policy, but so many of the other areas that are affecting Arizona families that in ways does affect public education.
Right. And we're going to talk more about that because it's really going to be important for Tempe in particular. Mm-hmm. The city of Tempe still has an aging population that mm-hmm. hasn't moved out because of affordability yep. issues. And to your point, younger families can't yep. move in, so that there's a decrease in enrollment. So stay tuned because we're going to talk more about that in the next episode. But for now, thank you for joining us. Like, subscribe, whatever you do on social media, do for Around the District. And we'll see you in the next episode.